Dr. Voremi, please, you can start now, please.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Hello, I hope, are you hearing me?
Good evening.
Oh, good evening very
yes,
much.
We're hearing you. Good evening.
Okay, very good. So we want to start now. Please, we want to start with an opening prayer. Please, can Pharmacist Adene Koinde please give us the opening prayer? Pharmacist Adene Koinde, please. Are you still there? Hello? Pharmacist Adene Koinde, can you give us the opening prayer, please?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Loud and clear. Yes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We give thanks to and glory to Almighty God for this night. We thank Him for making this night possible. As we continue this lesson, we pray that Almighty God will grant us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, so that at the end of the day, whatever we learn today will be useful not only to us, to the community and humanity in general. Amen.
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 Amen. Yeah. Thank you very much, Pharmacist Adene. We appreciate that. So let's go to item 2. That's welcome and recognition. We want to start by welcoming everyone. The Drug Information Specialist group. We appreciate you. We want to start by welcoming our HABU leader, that's coordinator of coordinators, Pharmacist Folashade Lawal, fellow Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. Please, we welcome you, ma. We equally want to welcome our CPAN Executive Committee Chair, Dr. Joseph Madu. Welcome you too, sir, fellow Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. Equally, we want to welcome all our fellows of Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, fellows of the West Africa Postgraduate College of Pharmacists. Equally, we want to welcome our professors that are here, our lecturers that are here, our heads of pharmacy departments, our directors of pharmaceutical services, other VIPs, distinguished members of the Drug Information Specialist Group. You are welcome, and we pray that our session this evening will be a very educative and very productive one.
Good night.
I want to thank our speaker on investigational drugs. I tell you that this evening, we should just sit back, we should be attentive, because we will take home something very important for us as pharmacists of this new generation. So let me start by introducing our speaker, who will take us for the next 40 to 45 minutes. It's no other person than pharmacist Ojo Samuel, who happens to be at the Nigerian Army Reference Hospital in Kaduna State. We welcome you, sir. We appreciate you for accepting to speak unto us on this great topic. Without much ado, please let's remember that immediately after the presentation, there will be time for question and answer. That will take us. May I now call on our speaker, Pharmacist Ojo Samuel. Pharmacist Ojo Samuel.
Good evening, sir.
Please, sir, you are welcome. You now have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for the introduction, and all protocols duly observed. I greet everyone currently connected this evening to this lecture. It is also my prayer that it's going to be very educative and enlightening for us all. I appreciate the coordinators of this lecture for the privilege given to me to deliver on this particular topic. And I really believe this will go a long way in helping us to make great progress in our careers. And so just before we start, I would like to share the slide that I'll be using for today's presentation. Okay, just before I go on, I would like to verify, can we all see my screen that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Yes, you can see. Kindly go to slideshow and click on it to make it larger, please.
Okay. Let me try to go to slideshow.
Click on slideshow.
Okay, is it on slideshow now, sir?
Not yet. Look at the top. You see animation. You see slideshow. Click on slideshow. At the top.
Okay.
Now the ribbon there.
Okay, is it on slideshow now, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Once again, good evening, everybody. Today, we'll be considering the topic investigational drugs, which is a module under the drug information training for pharmacists. Once again, I am by name Pharmacist Ojo Samuel. And tonight we are going to be considering these lists, going from the introduction to the aim. We are going to consider a few key definitions, consider a few key issues regarding this topic, and then we are going to conclude the presentation this evening. But just before we start, I would like to lay a little emphasis on the importance of what we are about to discuss this evening. In recent times, especially when COVID-19 came up as a pandemic, I'm sure many of us were not surprised to find that many individuals, pharmaceutical companies, even governments were making efforts to research to get a drug, a wonder drug that could be a cure to COVID-19. Especially in Africa, we saw many people coming up with herbs, concoctions, with outrageous claims that it was able to totally cure COVID-19. However, we would find that many of these agents or drugs that were developed did not get international recognition. And this was partly because they could not follow the standard process of a randomized clinical trial. Before a drug can go from being an investigational drug to being internationally acceptable and to be marketed worldwide, it needs to go through a definite process. And so today's lecture will acquaint us all with that standard process that we need to go through to get an investigational drug to the market. Also, we have discovered that recently, when many researchers intend to conduct clinical trials, most of them shy away, or should I say most of us, since I believe a lot of professionals here will be involved in research, most of us shy away from the ethical review board. For example, in teaching hospitals, an ethical review board is set up as a panel to screen every single prospective researcher. And so for most institutions, they will require that the researcher should go through a training called CITI, standing for Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative. And it is a kind of training that most institutions use to ensure that their researchers are conducting a research that is ethically sound and that is following the due process. And today's lecture will be acquainting us with most of the things that you need to successfully pass through the ethical review committee. And since you'll be screened by the bioethics committee also, the knowledge we get from this presentation will give us all the knowledge that we need to successfully go through that screening. And so if you're a researcher here tonight, I believe this will be a very, very important lecture for you. So without further ado, I would like to go further into the presentation. Just to be sure, are we all still hearing me? Am I still live?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So our introduction. It is now estimated that approximately 2.6 billion is spent to get a new drug product to market in the United States. Likewise, in different parts of the world, the financial requirements of getting a drug or biologic agent from the test tube to the bedside is no small amount. I believe someone seeing this figure would be like, wow, could it take this much to actually develop a new drug? But as we go further in the presentation, we would see why it actually costs this much. And we'll be able to know how to go through this process and the role of a sponsor. And so the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, is the federal agency that decides which drugs, biologics, and medical devices are safe and efficacious. Determinations upon which the agency decides if a product can be marketed in the United States. I believe some of us will be familiar with the FDA. In fact, every one of us will be familiar with the FDA. And in Nigeria here or in other countries, there are different regulatory bodies that handle the roles of the FDA in our individual countries. In Nigeria, it is the NAFDAC. And if you are connecting from another country, you can also relate all the principles taught here to your country by substituting the FDA for the regulatory agency in your country. So since 1940, more than 10,000 new drug applications have been approved in the United States. Now, it is said in record that in the last 100 years, more drugs have been developed than it has ever been in the whole of human history. This is mostly due to the advances in technology and great strides in research. And so it is very important that clinical trials upon which the FDA will base their decision be both scientifically accurate and complete. Thus, healthcare professionals can play an important role in ensuring that the clinical trials conducted at their institutions meet the goals set forth by the study sponsor, the local investigator, and ultimately the FDA or the regulatory agency of that country, as the case may be. So what this statement is just trying to emphasize is that the decision that the FDA will make will be based upon the clinical results that is submitted to them. And thus, these experiments or this clinical trial must be done accurately and must be complete. So currently, most research conducted on investigational drugs is performed in medical schools, hospitals, and organizations, specifically designed to conduct clinical research trials. In some institutions, a pharmacist will be hired specifically to handle investigational drugs. More frequently, however, this role falls to other healthcare providers. But I would like to quickly note here that there are some roles in the process of development of a new drug that cannot be delegated to other healthcare providers or healthcare professionals. And we are going to see some of these roles as we go further in the lecture. And so to successfully manage investigational drug, such individuals or the team of individuals must be a bookkeeper, an inventory control manager, and most importantly, an information disseminator. Because one of the key attributes of a great leader is being able to carry your team along and properly pass on information and details of what the task at hand is. And so this is one of the roles of a pharmacist or a healthcare provider on a drug development team. So the aim of today's lecture is to acquaint pharmacists and even other healthcare providers with requirements of conducting a research. And secondly, to also discuss the roles of a pharmacist in development of investigational drugs. You know, it's been a case where sometimes in institutions and ethical review bodies being set up, and a pharmacist is being called upon to be part of that board. And most of the time, we find that pharmacists pass on the baton of responsibility to other members of the board because they don't know what to do. And today's lecture will properly educate us that we can know what exactly is our role if we're to be called upon to serve in an ethical review committee, or even if we are to be called upon to be part of a clinical research team. And I believe this would really be a great help in our careers. And so let's consider a few key definitions that will be very helpful in this topic. An investigational new drug, acronymed as IND, is a drug or biological product that has not been approved for use by the FDA. It is used in a clinical trial to investigate its safety and efficacy. I highlighted those two words because they are very crucial when it comes to the issue of investigational new drugs. The safety and efficacy parameters must be firmly established. And so if safety of that drug or the efficacy of that drug cannot be properly defined, there is no way this drug will be accepted by the FDA or approved. And so the label of an investigational drug must bear the statement, caution, new drug limited by federal or US law to investigational use. Now, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, is the agency of the US government that is responsible for ensuring the safety and efficacy of all drugs on the market in the United States. Please note that the FDA does not regulate the practice of medicine, and prescribers are, as far as the agency is concerned, free to use any marketed drug for off-label use. For example, chloroquine, popularly known to be used in malaria and also used in rare cases for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis and systemic lupus erythematosus, has an off-label use to be used in the treatment of COVID-19. Many hospitals around the world adopted the use of chloroquine during the COVID-19 pandemic, even up till now. Now, this use is off-label. Nevertheless, because chloroquine is already a generic drug, it is possible for them to use it as such. However, in a case where we are bringing forth a new molecular entity, or we are bringing forward a new a drug to target a specific patient population that is at risk with a different dose of that drug, if that drug is to be approved for that use and marketed as such, there would be need for a submission to the FDA for clinical trials to be commenced. Just to be sure, am I still on? Am I still connected?
Yeah.
Very well. Okay, thank you very much. Next, we'll be considering the term investigational new drug application, the IND application. This is a submission to the FDA containing chemical information, preclinical data, and a detailed description of the planned clinical trials. Perhaps I should emphasize the word detailed description because the regulatory body needs to know how the clinical trial will be done. Now, another term similar to this is the new drug application, which is the application to the FDA requesting approval to market a new drug for human use. The NDA contains data supporting the safety and efficacy of the drug for its intended use. Now, these two terms look similar, but they are totally different. While the IND application is submitted prior to clinical trials, prior to phase 1 to 3 of clinical trials, the new drug application is submitted after phase 3 of clinical trials, and it is an application for the marketing of that drug. And so while the investigational new drug application is submitted before the drug is ever used in any human, the new drug application is only submitted after phase 1 to 3 clinical trials has been done. So other key definitions are the sponsor, which is an organization or individual who takes responsibility for and initiates a clinical investigation. As a researcher, if you have a new drug that you think would be of great benefits to the world, most of the time you might not have the amounts needed to sponsor your research. Earlier on, I stated that an average of $2.6 billion was needed to develop a new drug and get it marketed. And this is no small amount for a single individual. And so you definitely need a sponsor. The sponsor may be an individual or pharmaceutical company, government agency, academic institution, private organization, or any kind of organization. And please note, in submitting a research proposal, although this is not under the jurisdiction of today's, you need to be able to bring a convincing proposal before you can get sponsorship. And so getting a sponsor is very vital in making progress in developing an investigational drug. Now, who is a sponsor investigator? This is an individual who both initiates and conducts a clinical investigation. That is, submits the IND application and directly supervises administration of the drug, as well as other investigator responsibilities. Now, the sponsor investigator is like the man that spearheads the clinical trials. He's the one that oversees everything that is to be done during the clinical trial, and he's the man at the front of the team. In some cases, he can also be called the principal investigator. Now, who is a subject? A subject is an individual who participates in a clinical investigation, either as the recipient of the investigational drug or as a member of the control group. Then lastly, let's consider what we mean by a drug master file and IRB. A drug master file is a submission to the FDA that may be used to provide confidential, detailed information about facilities, processes, or articles used in the manufacturing, processing, packaging, and storing of one or more human drugs. I would like to note here, it is very important that if you are a principal investigator and you are about submitting your drug master file to a regulatory body, you must do all in your power to ensure that you go through confidential means. There have been cases where a drug master file is passed through a third party and details of that drug and the trial gets leaked out, and this is a major problem for the sponsor and the clinical research as a whole. And so it must be confidential in all cases. Now, the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board, also called the Institutional Ethics Committee, is a committee of reviewers that is responsible for ensuring the protection of rights, safety, and well-being of human subjects involved in a clinical investigation. So just to be sure, am I still connected?
Yes, you are. Go ahead,
Okay.
please.
So let's go on to the history of drug development regulation. Many people have criticized the FDA, and many regulatory bodies for the long process and the very arduous task given to developers of new drugs. Many people feel the process is just too long or it's just too expensive. But I would like us to look back in history and to know why it's actually this expensive and why it is actually this tasking. The evolution of drug regulation in the world is a study in human tragedy. Crises have instigated the development of many of the laws regulating drug development, preparation, and distribution. The first federal law in the United States developed to deal with drug quality and safety was the Import Drug Act of 1848. This law was passed after it was discovered that American troops involved in the Mexican War had been supplied with substandard imported drugs. Again in 1937, the drug sulfanilamide was released. The drug showed promise as an anti-infective agent, and the vehicle used for this preparation was diethylene glycol. Now, a total of 107 people died after taking this preparation. Within 1 year, just 1 year of this tragedy, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 was enacted. Again in 1962, an inordinate number of pregnant women in Western Europe gave birth to children with severe deformities. These deformities were related to the use of the drug thalidomide. I'm sure many of us are familiar with the thalidomide disaster. This is actually what happened then. And so the Kilver-Harris Drug Amendment was passed that same year because of this incident. This law specified that the manufacturer had to demonstrate proof of efficacy as well as safety prior to marketing any new drug. Additionally, this law required that drug manufacturers operate in conformity with current good manufacturing practices, CGMP. Finally, this Kilver-Harris Drug Amendment also stated that the FDA had to formally approve a new drug application before that drug could be marketed. And so we can see that various disasters and tragedies has led to the development of new regulations. And so the evolution of regulation in drug development has been majorly due to the fact that we have discovered that lives can be lost easily. While in pharmacy school, my lecturer always said, a physician while attending to a patient can kill only one patient, but a pharmacist who makes a mistake in manufacturing a drug can kill millions. And so in development of new drugs, extreme care must be taken. And that is why the lengthy process and the expense that comes as a result of this research is available today. So there are numerous other laws and regulations that affect drug products in the United States and all over the world. But those mentioned above provide the legal foundation for the current regulation of drug products in the United States. Based on these laws, the FDA has assumed a large role in assessing the safety and efficacy of drug products prior to their distribution in the United States. So, as time went on, there was a discovery that if a drug is approved in a particular country, that drug will still have to go through a long process of approval in another country. And so there came together some countries to ensure that there was uniformity of the standards of drug development. And for this reason, the International Conference on Harmonization brought together officials from Europe, the United States, and Japan to develop common guidelines to ensure the quality, safety, and efficacy of drugs. And irrespective of where you are listening from, you can also apply the principles from this lecture to conduct a standard clinical trial, as such that when you are trying to get an approval for your drug in other parts of the world or in other countries, you would have met the various criteria that they will be demanding, and it will not be having to start from scratch all over again. Now, let's go on quickly to the drug approval process. We are getting into the nitty-gritty of today's lecture, and this is a very simplistic list that just shows the process of drug approval and getting the investigational drug to the market. The first stage is preclinical testing. The second is filing an IND application, Earlier, we defined this as an investigational new drug application. And thirdly is clinical trials, or also called clinical testing. The preclinical testing, which is the first stage, is a test conducted either in vitro or in animals. In vitro meaning being conducted in a test tube out of a human cell, or also in animals, not yet in humans. Please note, preclinical testing must first be done in animals and out of a human cell. After the preclinical testing is complete, the sponsor will then file an IND with the FDA. Now, filing an IND is the second stage, as I highlighted here. But before filing the IND, the sponsor must have developed a pharmacologic profile of the drug, determined its acute and subacute toxicity, and have sufficient information regarding chronic toxicity to support the drug's use in humans. You know, after establishing parameters like the LD50 and the other toxicity parameters, there would be insights on the dose of this drug that should be used in the clinical trials. And so preclinical testing is very crucial in the process of developing a new drug. Now, going to the third stage, which is the clinical trials. There are phases of clinical trials. There are 4 phases. Clinical studies generally begin cautiously. As experience with these agents grows, the dose and duration of exposure to the agents may also increase. The number of patients treated at each phase of study and the duration of the study can vary significantly depending on statistical considerations, the prevalence of patients affected by the disease, and the importance of the new drug. For example, in the development of COVID-19 vaccine, many people criticized the short time that it took for a vaccine to be developed. Most people said, is it not requiring at least 15 to 20 years for a drug or a vaccine, a biologic agent to be developed? However, because of the importance of this new drug, the approval process and the drug development process was fast-tracked. And so in different cases for different drugs, the approval process and the timeline can be different, all depending on the prevalence of that disease and the importance of the new drug. And because COVID-19 was a worldwide pandemic, it was of great importance. So after phase 3 trials, phase 1, 2, 3 have been completed, the sponsor will then submit an NDA, which means a new drug application, as I explained earlier, or a BLA. A BLA is a biologic licensing application. That's for biologic products, to the FDA, requesting approval of the medicinal products for marketing. The final phase of clinical studies is referred to as phase 4 trials. After the drug has been approved, post-marketing studies may be initiated. Now, I'm sure we are all familiar with phase 1 to phase 4 of clinical trials, but just to remind us or to refresh our memory, this is a miniature diagram showing the phases of a clinical trial. Let me try to use an annotation just to show what I'm referring to. Okay. This stage that I'm highlighting currently is the preclinical stage from this point to this point. Please hope we are seeing the annotation marker that I'm using.
Yes,
No.
go ahead. Yes, yes, we're seeing the rate,
Okay.
the rate. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So
I'm
from
not
this,
seeing it too.
Yes,
okay,
it's
the red
one
dot.
red dots. Just,
Okay, it's the red
go ahead.
dot. I'll try to maybe make it a little more conspicuous. So
Okay.
from this point to this point is called the preclinical phase. Now, either for a biological product or for a chemical synthesis, at the end of the day, what we are looking for is a lead compound. The lead compound is that active ingredient that has pharmaceutical activity. Now, when this has been established and the lead compound has been gotten, it is tested in animals just to demonstrate the efficacy, the selectivity, and the mechanism. But essentially here, what we desire to get is the toxicity profile of that particular agent or that particular drug. After this has been fully researched, an IND is submitted to the FDA. And when this is approved, then the clinical research goes on to phase 1 of clinical testing. In phase 1, the major goal is to establish the safety of that drug. Now, this stage is usually conducted in healthy patients, like those that do not have any morbid conditions whatsoever. But in some cases where research is being done on an oncological drug, because of the toxic nature of such a drug, phase 1 can also be conducted in patients that are having that disease condition. Now, in phase 2, after phase 1, in phase 2, the major goal is efficacy. Does it work in patients? Now, if it has the safety profile has been established, the next thing is this drug actually useful? Is it efficacious for this particular disease condition? In phase 3, what is being checked for is now both the safety and the efficacy. And also this drug is being compared to generics that are available in the market. Because if I were to synthesize a new molecule that I claim has anti-inflammatory effects and has antipyretic effects, it's going to be compared to other drugs in the market to see if this is economically viable for us to go on with production of this drug, and to see if it is actually safe on the long run, and to see how efficacious and how better patients will respond to these agents. And so after phase 3, a NDA, which is a new drug application, is then submitted to the FDA. We can see the timeline down here. You know, at this point, for most drugs, it can take up to 8 to 9 years before you get to the point of submitting an NDA. After this is approved by the FDA, then the drug can now be marketed in phase 4, which is post-marketing surveillance. Here, the drug is being researched in multiple centers, and the long-term effects of these drugs can be observed, and wider patients population can also partake in this. So let's go on quickly to the roles of healthcare professionals. The healthcare professional can play a vital role in the clinical research process by, number 1, being the principal investigator on a study, reporting adverse events, preparing the IND, maintaining drug accountability records, and also providing financial evaluation of investigational protocols. Other roles of healthcare professionals include serving on the institutional review board, and where applicable on the scientific review committee. The IRB is to evaluate the research proposal to ensure that, 1, the risk to subjects are minimal. Now, what I'm about to listing will give us knowledge of what we are supposed to do. Peradventure, you as a pharmacist, you are being called to serve on an IRB. What exactly are you supposed to do? On the IRB, you are supposed to ensure that the risk to the subject is minimal. Secondly, this board will also ensure that the expected risk anticipated benefits ratio must be reasonable. Thirdly, equitable subject selection is used to make sure that this drug is being tested in a wide array of patient population. Also, informed consent must be received from each participant or his or her legally authorized representative. One key word I would like to note here is informed consent. Whenever the subjects are being coerced to use an investigational drug, this violates the ethical standards of a research. And so the IRB is saddled with the responsibility of ensuring that informed consent is available from each patient. Now, this informed consent must be documented in writing. Data must be monitored to ensure subject safety, and also patient confidentiality must be maintained. Now, let's go on further to the role of pharmacists. I believe I have distinguished colleagues here currently connected to this lecture. What exactly are the roles that are peculiar to us? One of it is reviewing the research protocol. As a pharmacist, we are trained to understand how a drug works, to understand almost everything about a drug. And so for an investigational drug, when a protocol is being prepared to be submitted, a pharmacist can review that research protocol to check if it contains the complete and appropriate details like the pharmacokinetics of that drug, details like how that drug can work in the human body, that's the mechanism of action. Also, you'd be able to review it to check if there are compatibilities of that drug with other agents and if that drug is actually safe. So for you to be able to review the research protocol, you would have to have knowledge in the area of research, but this is a role pharmacists can play. Another role is managing drug costs. For some of these protocols, there can be multiple dosage regimens. And so a pharmacist can advise on how these drugs can be maybe administered together on cost reduction measures in order to ensure that money is not just being wasted. Also, in cases where the investigational drug is being gotten from another manufacturing site, as a pharmacist, you also have the role of being an inventory manager, being able to control the stock to ensure that the institution conducting the trial does not run out of stock, and we are always able to manage the cost of transportation of this drug and getting their supply. Because a pharmacist is licensed not only to prepare drugs, but also to procure and to distribute. And so we are able to manage the drug costs in a research. Another role is disseminating research information. Every pharmacist is a drug information provider. Even from my early days as an undergraduate, immediately people know that you are in the pharmacy line, they start asking you questions about their drugs. This is because they believe you should know everything about a drug, which most likely is not so all the time because we are also continually developing ourselves. However, as a pharmacist, you are equipped to be able to properly explain to those on the research team details about the research, the compatibilities of a drug, the safety profile, the storage and stability of that drug, and to get the team acquainted with how the research is going. And so as a drug information provider, you can play a key role on a research team. Another role is securing drug supplies for research. Another role is maintaining drug accountability records, because we are being taught that if it is not documented, it has not been done. And you definitely need accountability records for approval from the regulatory bodies, the FDA or NAFDAC or the regulatory agency in your country. And lastly, a pharmacist can also play the role of randomizing and blinding interventions. I'm sure we are familiar with the terms blinded trials, single blind, double blind trials. Now, in a single blind trial, one of the parties is not aware of the drug that is being given. In double blind, two parties are not aware of the specific drug that is being given because there is always a control group. This is just to ensure that the results gotten from these clinical trials can be relied upon, just to make sure that it's not a guesswork or it was not just fabricated. And so a pharmacist can play a crucial role in randomizing clinical trials. In conclusion, a thorough understanding of the regulations governing drug development is extremely helpful when conducting clinical trials. Related to the conduct of clinical trials, healthcare professionals and specifically pharmacists are frequently involved in obtaining, storing, and dispensing the agents being utilized in the clinical trial. In addition, healthcare professionals and specifically pharmacists can be quite involved in providing protocol and drug information to the investigator, other study personnel, and equally importantly to the study subjects. Just like in provision of healthcare, where it is multidisciplinary in approach, so also in research, it needs a multidisciplinary approach, in the sense that when every personnel required in that research is properly engaged, the clinical trial will not only run smoothly, but it will also be able to get substantial results. Now, a few recommendations I have here is healthcare professionals should seek to acquire knowledge about the regulations governing drug development. And secondly, healthcare professionals can and should play an integral role in the conduct of clinical trial at their institution. And so an encouragement I have for us all is, as pharmacists, we should not shy away from research and being involved in clinical trials, because this is not something that is too abstract. It is what we are being trained for. And we not being able to stand up to the task is not going to help us in our career as it may, because people expect a lot from the pharmacist. And since we are being trained to be able to handle things like this, we must be able to seek knowledge and to be able to contribute our quota. These are my references, and I say thank you to everyone for paying rapt attention and for listening in this lecture. I hope it has been educative for us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think he deserves more ovation than that. Can we give him a better ovation, please? Wow. That's a great presentation. Very well. Please, while thanking the speaker, it's time for us to quickly address questions or comments quickly because of time. So please, if you have questions, please, this is the time to signify or send it via messages so that we can attempt it and answer this. And I don't want us to limit it alone to the speaker. When questions are being raised or asked, some of us are more knowledgeable as well. Some of us can attempt it, but in the context of the presentation, basically for now, so that will be narrowed in terms of what we want to ask as questions. But anything outside that, any of us can attempt to answer it. Thank you. Yes, question and answer, please.
However, Dr. Fitz,
Question related to the presentation.
Fitz, can you go ahead?
Yeah, this is Mr. Babatunde from the US.
That was a great presentation, and I would say that I have learned a lot. I just have this to say about COVID-19 vaccine. A lot of people are concerned because of the fast approval of the vaccine. We know it's a major pandemic that cut across all continents. However, there could be chances that some of the approval checklists are overlooked. Could we say that people who decided to say they are not taking the vaccine, could we say they have a good reason to avoid taking the vaccine?
Okay.
Did you get my question, please?
Yes, about COVID-19.
Yes, the vaccine. Those who decided not to take the vaccine, possibly because the checklist of the approval were probably rushed through, and they decided
Fast-tracked.
that they are not taking fast track. Thank you. Could we say they have a genuine reason to do so? Or in this case, because it's of global public health concern, that is a priority above any approval.
Okay, it's noted. Thank you very much. The presenter, I see Dr. Iriferi Faith also raising up his hand, and another person, Ibrahim Doma. Can you just, yes, go ahead, so that we note it together and the speaker attends it. Yes. Dr. Ibrahim Doma, Dr. Iriferi Faith, please go ahead. Please, you can ask your question. Unmute yourself,
okay.
Ask your question.
Okay, good evening. Hello.
Hello, go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening.
Actually, my own is not a question, but rather a comment regarding the fast tracking of the development of vaccine. Not only vaccine, but actually related to drug development. There is actually improvement in the process of drug development, so much so that there are even computer-aided drug development system now. And the knowledge of stem cells has also helped in fast-tracking development of drug. Agreed, there are sometimes emphasis in the urgency or the requirement of drug development whenever there is a large population that are requiring the use of such drugs, especially in the case of the development of the corona vaccine. But the development of drug with regards to issues related to computer-aided development has actually fast-tracking the issues of development of drugs. This is the only comment that I want to chip in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Iriferi Faith, are you still asking questions? Please go ahead. I saw your hand up before. Dr. Iriferi Faith. Okay, Dr. Iriferi Faith, are you asking your question again? I saw your hands up. If not, we want to go forward. Can I ask? I think as regards the COVID-19, just as the pharmacist Ibrahim Doma said, so I wouldn't know whether our brother who asked from US that asked the COVID-19 fast track vaccine production, whether people are still very okay with that or not. Are you satisfied, sir?
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious to know from the presentation. Yeah, he answered partially, but I was just thinking that would it be possible? Is it a legitimate concern to say this thing is rushed through? Some people have issues with is it Moderna? Some were saying it's an RNA designed vaccine, and there could be implications in the future. So, but thank you for answering the question. Anyway, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir. I think it still continues, the study continues, the post-marketing surveillance continues. it's not all said and done. And also on emergency use, I think there is emergency use. So I think that can be fast-tracked and accelerated, kind of, so to say. The benefit and the risk ratio, most times they weigh it out and see which way to go. Thank you very much. Any other question, please? Any other question for the speaker, for the presentation, or comments? Or comments?
Sir, I think I'm seeing some questions on the chat box.
Okay, please.
So I'm already
Can you
taking
attend them? Please attend.
I'm already taking note of those questions too. I don't know if that will be all.
Please attend those ones for now.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so just before I attend to those ones that were sent in the chat box, I also just like to add a little to the question that was asked on the fast tracking of the COVID-19 vaccine. So essentially, why it was fast tracked as such was because the risk benefit ratio was being weighed, and it was considered by the FDA and other regulatory agencies that having a vaccine on the long run would, if it can be of benefit to the population, even though there might be some risks involved, it will go a long way to saving countless lives, because the death toll for COVID-19 was no small number. And so the consideration of the risk and benefits in this case was what instigated the fast tracking. However, every patient, in my opinion, should have the right to either receive or reject the vaccine, because in a case where post-marketing surveillance is still being done, the area of pharmacogenomics will help us to understand why some certain patients react in certain ways, why we have idiosyncratic reactions in some certain patient population. So these patients also have the right to say, no, we are not ready to take it yet, or I'm fine with it and I'm ready to go along with it. So quickly on to the question in the chat box. The first one I'm seeing here is the aspect of phase 1 trials, where I mentioned that healthy subjects could be used, but that's okay. Now, in phase 1 trials, healthy subjects are actually supposed to be used because we are first trying to establish the efficacy of that drug. But I mentioned the oncology case as a caveat to this, because most oncological drugs are very toxic in nature. And to establish safety, you don't expect us to put a healthy human being at risk by administering such a toxic drug. And so that is why in oncology researches, there is an exception. I hope I've been able to answer this question by Rukayat Olayinka. Okay, next to the second question. The first is, you said you kept referring to FDA. If I develop a drug in Nigeria, do I get FDA approval or NAFDAC or both? Okay, for a researcher in Nigeria, our major regulatory body is NAFDAC. And so if you'd be developing the drug here in Nigeria, what you'd be expected to do is to make NAFDAC in charge of overseeing your clinical research. But however, it will help you if you can ensure that your clinical research process is standardized and also in line with that, with the standards that is being proposed by the FDA. The reason for this is, in case you would want your research to be widely accepted and approved in other countries, you going through the standard process that the FDA has laid down will make acceptance of that drug easy in other countries. However, because you are in Nigeria, you would have to abide by the regulations of NAFDAC. Secondly, you asked what is the relevance of NAFDAC number or listing. We would notice that even for some drugs that have been internationally approved, it is not freely marketed in Nigeria because it does not have a NAFDAC number. This is because NAFDAC is the body that regulates the distribution, sales, procurement of drugs. And so, even if the drug is approved internationally, as Nigerians, we also need to have a body that we can hold accountable if a drug is not working as it should be. And that is why even internationally approved drugs need to have a NAFDAC number here in the country. Then thirdly, you asked that are there specific needs for drugs for use in children or pregnant women? In clinical trials, populations at risk are not allowed to partake in the trials, at least for phase 1, phase 2. But when it starts getting to phase 3 and phase 4, where there is post-marketing surveillance, if the safety and toxicity profile has been thoroughly researched, we can start to include this specific patient population. But ordinarily, they are not supposed to be subjects in a clinical trial. Then another question here says, is the use of fluoroquinolones in children safe or used off label? Physicians are prescribing them a lot. Okay, actually, formally research showed that fluoroquinolones was not advisable to be administered in children, especially those lesser than 12, because there is risk for tendonitis and inflammation of the joints. However, new research is starting to show that fluoroquinolones are actually safe. Now, the extent of this research, I do not know, but gradually people are starting to buy into this idea. And, you know, I've gone through some articles, but I myself am not personally convinced yet, because just recently a patient was prescribed fluoroquinolone. I think she was aged about 14 or 15, and she had an issue of dizziness and general body weakness. Nevertheless, this is just one patient. And so the extent of this research, I do not know, but it is something that people are gradually getting to accept. And so I think I've answered all the questions in the chat box, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much, presenter. Pharmacist Nuruddin Usman, I saw your hands up. Do you want to ask a question, please, or comment?
Yes, thank you very much. Mine is a comment. I want to, first of all, commend the presenter for this excellent presentation. And my comments will be on 1, 2, or 3 things. One of the things he has addressed just now about the reasons for post-marketing surveillance. I wanted to just add the issue of the subjects most at risk. That is the issue of pregnant mothers, children, and even the elderly. So one of the major reasons for post-marketing surveillance is by the time the drug gets to phase 4, this special population that are not usually captured within phase 1, 2, and 3 are normally given during the post-marketing surveillance, because post-marketing surveillance is after the drug has already gotten approval. So one way or the other, for certain reasons, children, pregnant mothers, and elderly are usually given. So that is this aspect. And of course, I want to also add in relation to COVID-19 vaccine. In addition to what other people have said, I want us to remember that COVID-19 vaccine that has been developed on the basis of RNA, that is cellular RNA, was not developed within 2019. We must remember that the reason why that vaccine was successful was because there's already in existence the discovery of Human Genome Project, which has already been discovered in the last 2 decades. So that was just developed on the basis of that. It wouldn't have been possible to develop RNA vaccine without discovering Human Genome Project. So we must know that the fast tracking of that process was based on that discovery. And it was discovered 2 decades ago. So we must continue to remember this while we are making our arrangement. And of course, the presenter also made mention that anyone has the right to reject vaccine because it is their right. Of course, world over, everybody agrees that it's the right of individuals to either accept or to reject vaccines based on certain reasons. But remember, the right of a particular individual stops when the right of others starts. The truth of the matter is several diseases have been eliminated world over from the history of the world by the use of vaccine. So the truth is that anyone who refuses to get vaccinated is standing a risk to the others. And they also have the right to be protected. So to balance between your own right and the right of others is where the controversy is. So when you say you are not taking, it means you need to isolate yourself permanently from other people, which is very difficult. That is why you can see people battling helter-skelter to accuse people who refuse to take the vaccine. That's the truth. So you have the right, but other people have the right to be protected. Diseases have been eliminated as a result of vaccine. All these things we must put into consideration. Thank you.
So that you can at least.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you for that. So we're talking about public health issue. That's what Pharmacist Nuruddin Usman said. It's a public health issue, and as a community, until we achieve the herd immunity, you just have to do what is expected of you to do because of restrictions, and so that you cannot do this, you cannot go here and there, banking, school, travel, and what have you. So we have to do what we are expected to do so that we can keep our communities safe. Thank you very much. It's a public health issue, and for COVID-19, we just have to keep on doing what we are doing and do it better. On this note, I want to believe we are rounding up now. We have already overspent the timing given to us, because the questions are coming and comments are coming, and they are very, very pertinent to this discussion. Dr. Akebelo, sir, do you have any
we still have some.
we
have 2 more hands up. We have Dr. Falawumi and Dr. Rukayat. We have their hands up.
Okay. I think Dr. Rukayat has been answered. It's only Dr. Falake, I guess.
No,
okay, let's have you, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. As a healthcare professional here in the US, I wanted to ask why, since there is like an international regulatory body, why is it that there are some drugs that are produced here in the US and are rejected in another country? For example, in Canada, some of the drugs that are produced here are not accepted over there. So can we really say an international regulatory body is sufficient for the approval of these drugs from clinical trials? And also, in addition to the question from Rukayat, before it gets to the stage of trials with cancer patients, first, like the doctor initially mentioned, the study is first conducted on stem cells, which are normal cells, and also cancerous cells. So when that is established, then it is now moved to the phase where it is actually conducted on cancer patients themselves. So I don't know if just a brief light can be shed on my question. Thank you.
Okay, our presenter, can you quickly attempt that? Or if there's anyone in the audience to please attempt it quickly. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Regarding the question on drugs being approved and accepted in the US and being rejected in Canada, during the course of the presentation, we discussed something on the harmonization of drug regulation. Now, this is still in process because currently in the world, there is still a little contention on a drug that is accepted in this particular country being rejected in another. but efforts are gradually being made to ensure that there is harmony. Because in the International Harmonization Conference that was between 3 countries majorly, though they came up with some decisions, but not everything has been fully implemented, and it's not fully functional as such. And so research is progressing, and I truly believe there would be a time when there would be an international regulatory body as such that will be able to give approval, to drugs for generic use. However, each country has their right to either reject or accept a drug based on their discretion to protect their citizens. So I believe this lies with the leadership, the healthcare leadership of that country. Then also regarding the case of the research of oncology drugs and stem cells, this is possible because more knowledge has been gotten in this particular area. But in a case where the stem cells that are being used give considerably good results, by the time you would want to proceed this research in actually live patients, it's a whole different ballgame, because the human body is a super advanced system that can come up with just anything. Sometimes you never know what to expect. And so that is why caution still needs to be taken in this particular area. So I hope I've been able to attend to this question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, our presenter. We appreciate you for that. I hope we also know that there's politics. There's politics in all this too. Aside the professional thing, there's still politics. International politics, conspiracies, all these theories are still there. So some countries might just have their reasons, ego, whatever, many things can play, so that one is still there. Anyway, we want to appreciate everyone for being part of this great presentation. Basically, Dr. Heike Bello, sir, can you have a closing remark from you, sir?
Okay, Dr. Faremi, for that one. We want to start by saying we're giving thanks to God Almighty for giving us another opportunity to come together and share very useful knowledge. We thank our young scholar for that scholarly presentation. So educational, impactful, and very inspiring. We thank you so much. We also thank our participants from within and outside the country for your contribution. We thank our moderator for handling the job, for the job well done. And for all the coordinator of this group, we appreciate you. We thank you for your support. And for all the participants, we thank you all. We say thank you and good night to all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Heike Bello. On the closing part, can we have closing prayer said by Pharmacist Rukayat, please? If she's still on, Pharmacist Rukayat, doctor, please. Can we have the closing prayer said by you? Hello, Pharmacist Rukayat, please. Can we have you closing prayer? Okay, what about Pharmacist Ismail Sulaiman, please, sir?
That's our prof, as well as my prof.
Hello, Fam Rukayat, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead. Let's have you.
Okay. We want to thank Almighty Allah for a wonderful session this evening. We pray that all what we've learned will go a long way to impact our practice and for the benefit of mankind. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, praise be to God, the Lord of the world, the beneficent, the merciful, Master of the day of judgment. You alone we worship and you alone we ask for help. Guide us onto the right path, the path of those with whom you are pleased, not of those with whom you are angry with, nor of those who go astray. Amen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wassalamu ala al-mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you too. We appreciate you all.
I know everyone has been superb. Good night.
Lamanta, we appreciate you so very much. Thank you, Dr. Mutias. We appreciate you. We appreciate you all. Yes, so
Good
much
night,
appreciated. Thank you.
everyone. Yes.
Thank you all.
Dr. Ibrahim, thank you too.
Our secretary. You appreciated.
Thank you, sir. You are really trying.
Thank you so much, ma. Thank you for your support.
Good night, sir.
So, good night. I see you. Thank you. Thank you, ma.